Dean will call meeting of Public Works tonight to order. Is there any changes to the agenda?
There is not.
I'll call for motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move. Approve.
Motion moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carried. Public input. All right, wastewater treatment plants, Mr. Ben.
Good afternoon. So I'm just going to quick skim over my notes. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to shout out. So we had our triannual laboratory audit. There were a couple minor deficiencies. I corrected them and I got the response for them this afternoon saying that everything is good. So our next audit will be in 2025. I still have not heard from the DNR regarding our new wastewater permit. We should have that by the end of this month, so it can go into effect in April. When that happens, when we do our walk through the plant, if we're still up for that in May, I believe, we'll go over more of what changes could be on that and what we have to do to meet those changes. Let's see. We are looking at possibly moving from ferric chloride to alum. So tomorrow we're going to clean out one of our horizontal tanks that's been around for 35 years. Nothing has ever been inspected as far as I know. We kind of want to look at alum because of the availability compared to ferric chloride, because when there's a downturn in the economy, because basically the ferric chloride is from the car manufacturing. When people stop buying cars, the ferric chloride supply goes down, and then the demand doesn't go down because everybody has to meet their phosphorus limits. So we're going to look into see if that is a viable option. We did get our mixer on our north digester fixed. You can see the picture where the arc flash happened. Turns out that the lugs were not tightened on the motor starter, and we had ANS, the electrician that August Winter had, go through everything in the new control panel that was brought to us through Energenics, and they found a lot of loose wires. They said a couple of them, we're surprised, didn't even fall out. So we got those all tightened. So we hope that is
that from all the banging going on around out there?
What's that?
That from all the banging and stuff going on out there, the vibrations?
I don't think so. I think they weren't even tightened. Like when you tighten a wire, it gets flat. This was still round, like they just stripped the insulation off of it and just stuck it in there. So I don't know if this was a Friday thing and people are like, oh, I'm going home. So we're not really sure why it was that way, but hopefully everything's fixed now. But yeah, we were very shocked at the shoddy workmanship by Energenics because they're a big company. Let's see. And then we started getting high strength waste from AgriPure. They had some milk that wasn't up to spec, so they had to dump it. We took 12,000 gallons because that's all the capacity we had in our high strength waste tank at that time. It made some really good methane for us. So the more methane we produce, the less natural gas we have to purchase from We Energies. So we're hoping that once it gets cold again, we're going to be able to get like AgriPure. We've been taking in McCain Foods from Plover, and we just got some stuff from Central Waters Brewery last week, all making great methane. But unfortunately, we're kind of in no man's land. We're off a freeway or not near a freeway, and diesel fuel prices are going up. So is that going to be a viable option for people, or we'll have to see what's going to happen? Hopefully things get better. Other than that, does anybody have any questions on my write-up?
That's something we're charging them for? Is that something?
Yes, it's $30 per thousand that we're charging to take it in. It's basically in line with what Wapaka does, because they're basically our biggest I wouldn't say competitor, but they're the closest to our size. And I mean, unlike Appleton or Green Bay where, they can basically charge whatever they want.
Is that going to be an issue where they're lowering the amount of phosphorus that can be in the river? Is that going to be an issue?
That's one thing I have to go over once we get the permit, so I can actually know the pounds per day that they're going to allow us. Right now, nobody's sump pumps have run for like 2 months, or if they did, it was very little. At 0.3 milligrams per liter, which is probably what our phosphorus limit's going to be close to, we would not be violating right now. But once we start getting rain events, or who knows what the river is going to do this year, we'll start seeing sump pumps working again, and our flow is basically doubling from what they are now. And then that would put us over the limit that they're going to propose. I'm not sure if it's going to be a monthly average that they're going to go by or a yearly average on what they're going to charge us through. So if we have some really good months to make up for some of the wetter months, I don't know how that's going to offset what we're going to have to pay or what our violations are going to be. It's going to be all outlined in that new permit.
And that's sump pumps or just regular I&I from
Yeah.
clay laterals and things
Yeah.
like that.
But from what I've seen with televising, a lot of our sewer mains are not that bad. It's the laterals. And that's all private property. So
Honestly, in the fall, we have a huge increase in phosphorus also, correct?
depends on what we're bringing in. Loadings. I mean, unfortunately, this high strength waste is really great, but it's got phosphorus in it. So we'll have to weigh out, the benefit of not having to pay for natural gas as opposed to what our plant can handle during those times.
Just bringing in water from. Is it because the fertilizer's on the wall?
No, it's more the, basically you have a set limit in pounds per day as opposed to a milligram per liter. So the more flow you have, even though your milligrams per liter does not change, you actually are discharging almost twice as much to the river. It kind of goes up exponentially. So. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Second, citizen participation. We'll open the hearing.
Yep, so we are opening up the public hearing. This is the second required citizen participation meeting for our community development block grant. We have our engineer and consultant here, both from McMahon. Brad Warner is our engineer, and Lori Goes is our consultant helping us with grant administration. So we're going to kind of kick it off to them a little bit. I think Lori's going to kind of run through the requirements of our public hearing, and then Brad is available if we need to talk about any engineering type things with the project. So Lori, is that good enough for me to kick it off
That
to you?
sounds just fine, yes. Good evening, my name is Lori Gauze. I am a public management consultant at McMahon, and I work with a group that does projects similar to the one of yours, which is community development block grant administration. So I'm helping Chad and his staff and working with Brad Warner, the engineer, on your street projects that you were awarded your CDBG close funding for. So just as a reminder, the purpose of the Community Development Block Grant, that's CDGB, program is to develop a viable communities through the provision of decent affordable housing, suitable living environment, and the expansion of economic opportunities, principally for the benefit of persons of low and moderate incomes, which is anything above 51%. Your project area is at 58.02%, so which qualifies you for that funding. The purpose of this public hearing is you've already held your first public hearing that was at your application process. You've established your citizen participation plan. And now this is the second step in the public our citizen participation process of the grant. And the purpose of this hearing is to receive input from and provide updates to the community and project beneficiaries regarding the activities completed on the project. And this is one of the requirements that we need to go through. You have a grant agreement in place. There's a number of items that we have to follow, and there's a timetable established, and we have to meet those deadlines. And this citizen participation, the second public hearing, is due by March 31st. So you're within your qualified or required timeline for committing that, proceeding with that step and finishing that project goal, I want to call it that. So that's what we're here to do tonight, just to get you an update on what's going on with the project, ask if there's any citizens that have any concerns with the project at this point. So at this point, I think what I would do is, we're just following the agenda item here as I bring it up. I'm going to refer it over to Brad now so he can give you an update on what's been going on with the development of these streets in the project.
Thanks, Lori. So again, I'm Brad Werner with McMahon. I've been doing your consulting engineering on regular street projects and sewer projects and so forth for the last few years. In putting together the plans for this particular project, we're looking at Avon and Lima and Lyon, and looking at resurfacing those streets, and that's going to qualify or exceed the grant, and we'll be using the funds toward that. But before we pave over the top, we did some investigations with the help of city staff, and looked at the condition of the existing storm sewer over in that area. And there's a lot of storm sewer that needs to be rehabilitated and replaced. And Chad, thank you for pulling up those drawings. So where you see the darker gray, that's the street resurfacing that is proposed to be redone. And again, this project goes from North Water Street all the way to the north, to the refresh my memory, Chad.
We up to Wapaka, is that what it goes to?
Oh no, one block north of Wapaka.
North Street, yep.
North Street, thank you. And the magenta areas are curb and gutter replacements. The ones that are adjacent to the inlet structures and so forth that are shown, those are consequential damage to replacing the inlets. And the other areas shown, we had the city staff go out and take a look, and we've got areas where the curb is settled or cracked or failing. And so those are spot repairs that we're going to do as well. So, the project should, when completed, update, all the streets so that it's good for another, 25, 30 years. We also, as a part of this, updating the accessible or handicap ramps at the intersections with the sidewalk there. Those don't meet current ADA code, and so we'll take this opportunity to get those up to code as well. So, any questions?
Is that all three streets the same distance?
All three streets the same distance, correct?
And there's going to be spot repairs like Brad was talking about, everything in dark, colors. Those are going to be replacements. So like this storm sewer lead, evidently Brad has determined it as bad, or like they said, the inlets are old and small. So he's going to be replacing those, but it's not going to be a full reconstruction. So we're not 100% replacing storm sewer mains and things like that. Just spot repairs is what Brad has determined is needed.
That's all been televised and good.
Correct. Yeah, the televising is what helped us determine what storm sewers were having issues. You have some clay storm sewers out there, other ones that are cracked and broken, others where there've been multiple repairs on it, and you have all these different pipe materials and joints are displacing and things like that. So we're just going to get this cleaned up once and for all. A lot of the inlets too, if you see, it's a little hard because the way that the PDF came through, but these inlets are very shallow, less than, a lot of cases less than 3 feet deep. Some are less than 2 feet deep. So where we can, we're going to be able to change some pipe slopes and get a little more depth on those structures. And we'll also put sumps in them so we can get the bottom of those structures down below frost. So they're less likely to move, during, the winter months and then coming back into spring. When you have those shallow structures, a lot of times the frost gets underneath and it can move those up and down, and then further damages the road and prevents, drainage from getting into those structures. So.
And New London Utilities, I believe, has some water main that they're going to be replacing as well. I need to confirm that with Jason. We've been going back and forth, but Brad just had these done today. So I sent these over to Jason. So he's got a good idea of what we're going to be looking at. So we just need to coordinate with NLU to make sure that everything works well on the reconstruction.
Mhm.
Any questions on the plans itself, as long as we got Brad with us to kind of talk about? It's basically just, spot repairs and, replacing sidewalk or replacing concrete as needed and full.
Very similar to Cedar Northridge when we did that a few years back.
If
You're
there's-
just showing us Lion Street, or the other streets basically the same.
Yep, those were the other pages.
Locations.
So that's Lions. Here's Lima. Yeah, there's 9 pages in this document. So Brad's got them all
Right.
in there.
The pavement replacement is pretty much the same on each one, the limits, going around the radiuses on all the side streets and so forth. And then, a lot of curb and gutter in the intersections due to the inlet replacements and things. And then the rest of the streets is just dependent on how poor the existing curb conditions were. But none of the streets were that bad that full curb replacement was warranted.
If there's no other engineering questions, what's that?
What are they gonna do about the pipes that cross the street? That in the wintertime, because of the frost, they push up and you got a foot hump in the street.
Brad, did you hear the question?
Yep. So, so you get some frost movement there. We can address that, because again, that's part of the issue here is that how shallow these pipes are. So we can do some things to try to, to improve that a little bit. There's always, especially since you're using asphalt pavement, there's probably always going to be some, movement there because you're using a flexible pavement rather than a rigid one like concrete. But really that's due to the fact that these pipes are within the frost zone, just because they aren't in most cases able to get them down. But by doing this project, we should make some improvement on that. So you see a little less of that frost heave and the damages that result on the road surface because of that.
Any other questions for engineering?
Are these a total grind off and overlay, or are you just taking off a certain amount of inches?
No, total grind off of all the asphalt pavement. We're not replacing the base unless we have some soft spots, and we'll address those, each on their own. And then putting 4 inches of asphalt back on top.
If there's no other questions, I think we'll go back to Lori, correct? And talk
Yep.
about other activity.
Yeah, the next activities that will be completed, once Brad is got final engineering work done, we'll be bidding on the project, but prior to that, we'll also have to do some environmental review. There's a number of reports that will need to be filed with the state. So we'll be working on getting those completed. And then the project will just move along as any other project would go that you would do in the city, as far as we'll need to follow some of the requirements in the grant agreement to make sure we meet those deadlines, but we'll just continue as we go. So I don't know if Brad or Chad, if you have anything else as far as updates on the project, or if there's any questions from the committee members.
Brad, when do you anticipate we'll be ready for bidding? Just generally.
Generally, I'd say within a couple of weeks for bidding of the utility project. I think once we iron things out with New London Utilities to see, what their plans are with the water and see if we can't, do a joint project like we discussed. And then the Mike Simon in our office will be submitting the environmental document. And so we'll probably pause on bidding out the asphalt portion of the project until, that gets a little further down the line. Construction wise, I'd expect that we'd be, doing all the underground utility work in the first half of the summer. So up until maybe around the 4th of July, something like that. And then the second part of the summer then would be the asphalt work that would be done.
So I'm guessing we probably won't be looking at bringing it to council. The early April might be pushing it with advertisements, everything. We'll probably be bringing this for contracted award in May. Does that sound?
In May, unless we would do a special meeting, right? And then again, depending on, I can, if it was just us going on our own and not, working with New London Utilities, I could probably have this ready to go out, in about a week and a half. So that would, that might, when is the April meeting?
April meeting would be, well, we would bring it to the Board of Public Works on April 4th, then they would make the recommendation to council on April 12th.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that might, with advertising and things, that might be a little tight, right now. So
But we would have the bid opening by, somewhere in here.
right. Yep. We can have the bid opening in the first or second week of April would make sense. So.
Okay. Any questions on that? And then Lori, following up on housing needs identified?
In this project, there were no one that would be affected by the housing portion of it, so no one's going to be displaced. So there is really no nothing that would need to be identified at this point. Unless there is any questions from any citizens that are affected in those project areas.
Is there anybody from the public that is here that wants to provide comment? We are hearing none, Lori.
Okay. Sounds good. I will document that in the records.
Beautiful. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
One question is the water lines you're talking about, is that replacing the lead? Is that what they're looking at?
I think there's a water main, if I remember right, and don't quote me, because Jason and I have just talked about this briefly, but I think he's got a water main he wants to change out. I'm not sure about lead laterals. Mike, I don't know if you've had any discussion with this with.
I haven't.
Okay, so I need to confirm with Jay what the scope of his needs yet.
I will
So,
try to chat tomorrow. We got utility meeting tomorrow morning, so.
Yep. And I sent, like I said, I sent these plan sets to Jay today, so him and I will follow up, the next day or so as well.
I know that's been a big deal with that lead services.
Yep. And I know we've had discussion, I don't know if he wants to do it now, but we had discussion, we someday more than likely will need to replace the sewer laterals in that area. Ben has told me in the past that in the 80s, the city replaced the main on those streets and replaced the lateral up to the property line. But from the property line to the house still is old, probably clay tile in a lot of these areas. So that's, when the water table comes up, that might be a large contributor to our I&I. So someday we will more than likely have to work on replacing from the property line to the house in a lot of these areas. We want to give it enough advance notice. And Jay might want to wait, or it might be more convenient for Jay to replace the water lines at that point in time when we do the laterals all at once.
Yeah.
So we haven't had plans to do that yet, but that's something we need to work on down the road.
Yeah.
All right, so Mike, if there's nothing else, I would recommend closing the public hearing.
All right, We need a motion.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion made and second to close public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, abstain. Motion carried.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Lori. I think we're good on your end.
Thank you, Joel. Take care.
All right, I'm just writing a note. Check Jay tomorrow morning. Next thing would be the director's report.
So in your memo, talked about a couple of things. Number one, we want to recognize Mark Oz, completed 23 years of service on February 1st. He is one of our, he started over at the wastewater treatment plant, but is currently one of our street operators. We had a downtown reconstruction planning meeting again last Friday. We just continue to work on things. We did talk about, we spent some time to talk about bump outs, pros and cons to all that. McMahon is actually going to be working on an option. The thought process is if we do a bump out, the only location that it might be feasible to do that is across from Lincoln Court. That's a big walkway across the street right there. So we're looking into that one right now. We didn't feel like there was a need for bump outs anywhere else really, but except in that location just for safety walking across the street. So not a confirmed thing, just something we've been talking about to see if that's something we want to recommend to the board and to the council for including there for pedestrian safety. In the past, I've talked about that we're working with Interpipe right now. They've got the stormwater ditch that's on their property. We have an easement with them that is basically our ditch for maintenance reasons. That ditch has had problems with erosion. We also determined in the beginning, and it was brought to our attention, they brought it to our attention because they have a bridge across it and it's washing away the abutments of their pedestrian bridge. So that started our investigation of the erosion of that ditch. And in that investigation, we found out that the culvert that starts over by Titan Industries, the culvert goes underneath the street and then fills into that ditch. The water's actually starting to erode and going under the culvert instead of through the culvert. So we've got an erosion problem that we need to deal with as well. So it was a good thing that they brought this to our attention, that we caught this before that culvert really eroded and we'd had problems. So we are working towards that. Brad Warner, the gentleman you just saw, he's worked with us in, we've submitted the permit application to the DNR because it's considered a wetland situation. We have to get permit with the DNR with that. So we're working on that. And if everything works well, the plan is that the future potential TID 6 is going to fund this project for us. So it won't be a city bonded or things like that. We're going to use the TID money created from the TID district to fund this enhancement project or repair project. So I'll be bringing more details of how this is all going to work in the next month or so, but that's kind of our plan with that project.
One question for you, Chad.
Mhm.
On the, when they're doing the Main Street, do they, the group that looks at the planning and stuff, do they take any input, like say from the street guys, like these bump outs and stuff?
Yep. Luke was present at that meeting and he's been present to all the meetings. So he's the liaison kind of directly with the guys. He was supposed to go back and talk directly with the guys about this idea of maybe putting one bump out there. When we had the meeting with the city of Wapaka, they put out a bunch of bump outs in their downtown. And that was the first question. How did your DPW guys feel about this? And they said at first there was some, grumbles, but they figured it out pretty quick. And even Luke says, if you got one, it's not terrible. If you got 10 of them in a row, that's when it's a pain in the butt, in and out, in and out, in and out. So I don't know if you guys have any bump outs that you deal with in Appleton and how you guys deal with it.
Tons of them. I was just gonna say that we have found with our bump outs, they get beat up pretty hard plowing snow because whether you take the wrong angle to go around them, and we were getting a lot of crack on the curb head. So when we started a few years ago, we go to a 12-inch wide curb head now.
Okay.
On the bump outs. Just to reinforce them more because they do get hit. That's one thing we went to a lot in the crosswalk areas and stuff that are, a more busier intersection. We went to the 12-inch wide curb head. Yeah, we have bump outs. I mean, there's some on Marquette Street by the school. There's a bunch on Division and up Drew Street. They're kind of a pain,
Mhm.
they are, but it restricts the flow of, for the pedestrians. That's what the main reason is for.
It's designed for pedestrian safety. That's what it's all about, you
It's
know.
not the end of the world.
And where they're talking about putting in the colored stones by the crosswalks, that makes a tremendous difference too. If people can see the difference. I mean, I can see that would be a benefit versus having a bump outs.
And we got to put some work into that because I've heard comments about how it fades out and things like that. So I want to do some more research. And that's a very popular thing. It does identify your crosswalks very easily, but I wanted something that's going to last and make sure it's long-term.
Because as they fade and crack, and then it really sticks out.
Yep.
Versus just regular pavement.
Sure.
If you try to replace a block here, there, or a panel here and there, I mean, there's no way ever to match that.
So more homework for us. Otherwise, one thing I did not have in my report that I want to recognize. If you don't know, Michelle's leaving us. Her family's moving down to Milwaukee, Milwaukee area. So I want to thank Michelle for her years of service with the city. Last day is March 11th, I believe, I'm right. But I want to thank Michelle for coming to the meetings and keeping us straight and taking the minutes and what she's done. So I want to recognize Michelle.
Thank you.
Will be missed by far.
Yeah.
Right. That's all I got, Mike, for director's report.
All right. Returning to the agenda. For next month,
Future agenda items, I'll take a hold of that one. So we've been talking about doing the 1-year review for the all-terrain and utility vehicle ordinance, municipal code 9.49. In talking with Mike, we talked about how we want to wrap our head around this review. And what we came up with, and I've had some talks with Adam for the ATV club. They've expressed interest to do a presentation. We've got to figure out how we're gonna word that presentation yet, but I think we're gonna look at doing this as a 3-part agenda item, like I had it in my memo. Potentially, the first agenda item would be inviting the club to come in and do a presentation. Like Adam and I are going to meet next week to kind of figure out what exactly they're going to present and how we're going to word it on the agenda. So there'll be a presentation by the club. Then the next agenda item we thought was important was to basically have a public hearing. I mean, if you guys are going to do a review on this, it's probably good to have the public come in and voice their opinions, pro and cons, one way or the other, so you guys know exactly how people feel. So we're going to do some advertising in the paper and Facebook and stuff like that. Let people at least give them the opportunity to come in and voice their opinion. And then the third agenda item would be for the committee to have a discussion. What do you guys think? Do you expand the ordinance? Do you leave it as is? Do you retract the ordinance? What are you guys going to do? So that gives you the opportunity to discuss how you guys are going to move forward with this ordinance. I know there's been some requests and talk about some expansion, and I'm sure we'll hear about that at the public hearing next week. But that gives you guys the option of looking what you want to do with this ordinance. So this will be your 1-year review. And not that we're going to talk about it, and I don't think we should talk about it much tonight, but if you have different ideas of how you want to present that next week or next month. If you have any other ideas, let me know and I can talk to Mike. But that's kind of how we're talking about coining that for next month for your review. That's all I got.
Adam has something to say.
all right. Is there anything anybody else wants to bring up?
Move to adjourn.
Motion made and second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
And just a reminder, our next meeting will be, let's see, this is the March meeting, so this will be April 4th will be our next meeting. So we'll see that.